Well, good morning. Man, it is great to be with you all over here at Hamilton Road this morning and just to sing together like that. And just how amazing it is that those words that we were just singing, that they are true. And what a privilege it is. And I just want to say welcome again. If you're new with us, man, I'm just especially glad that you're here with us. And it's no mistake that your life and your path has kind of intersected or crossed paths with this church. And so I'm just especially glad that you're here this morning. Before we jump into our message this morning, there's something that you need to know about, though, really, and to celebrate at both of our services this morning. I want you to know about a couple, and it's Ed and Betty Lowry. And they're actually here at this 8:30 or 9 o'clock service with us this morning. But you need to know that this Tuesday is a very special day for them, that they are celebrating their 70th wedding anniversary. So that's something for us all to celebrate as a church this morning. And I'm like, yeah, man, that's awesome. Way to go. So thank you. Just such a great picture of commitment and loyalty. And so we love you as your church, and just excited about that. We are going to end up at this table down here in front of us to celebrate communion this morning. I love it. We were singing this song. You know, we are thirsty. We are hungry for more of you. And so just know that we're going to have the opportunity to take some steps with that this morning in a way and worshiping together. But we're going to continue on this morning in this message series that we began a few weeks ago, just called Stories Jesus Told. And this week we're going to be in Luke chapter 14. So if you have your Bibles, go ahead and get there right now. Luke chapter 14, verse 25. If you've got a hard copy, or if you've got your little phone or iPad or whatever, just whip it out and let's go ahead and get there. And while you're going there, I was just in preparing for this. I've been working on this for a while now and a lot this week. And just last night, it just hit me. I'm reading this passage again from verse 25 to 35 here. And it just hits me in a way that maybe it hasn't in a while, and maybe it should every time. But I was reading this, and I realized, Jesus, this is what you said. Like, these are your words that literally came out of the mouth of the Son of God. And now I'm supposed to stand up in front of your church, that's your people who are following you, and you want me to preach about and teach on these words that you said to these people. And I was just like, totally overwhelmed and brought to this place of, Jesus, I need your help. So please help me. And so I come here today with faith and trust in him that he will help me and help all of us to hear the words that he spoke 2,000 years ago. It's just such an honor and privilege that we get to assemble together and gather in this kind of way and do this. It's just an amazing thing. So let's not take this lightly this morning as we enter into this. So here we are. Luke chapter 14. We're just going to launch in here. And it begins like this. I'm just going to teach our way through these 10 verses that are right here. But it starts out like this. Large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, his wife and children, his brother and sisters, yes, his own life, he cannot be my disciple. And anyone who does not carry his cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. All right, let's just take a break right there. This is a lot to chew on. We just got to stop and kind of process this right where we are right here. So here's the deal. Jesus, in Luke's account, he is making his way towards Jerusalem, okay? And he's been dropping these hints along the way that things like, a prophet cannot die, prophet Israel cannot die in any other city other than Jerusalem. And so he's kind of saying, he is making his way to Jerusalem, and those who have ears to hear and eyes to see, that kind of beginning to understand what's going on, that he is going there, and he's going to offer himself as a sacrifice. So, but he's going to Jerusalem, and all the while, man, he's doing miracles. I mean, he's healing people. He's just totally turning the culture upside down in a way that is drawing people in who are hurting and broken. And all these people start following him. I mean, there's this mass of people that are coming behind him, the crowds. It's a hodgepodge of people, and they're kind of on the spectrum of belief and commitment and all those things. Some of them were his disciples. Some of them were just people who were just intrigued by what is going on, but they're all in the crowd. Now, Jesus, I just picture this, that he is walking along, and this crowd of people are with him, this old entourage, all these people, and he turns around to them, and he begins to say these words to them, saying like, unless you hate your father and your mother and your brothers and your sisters and your wife and your husband and even your own life, you can't be my disciple. I'm like, I mean, when I first read that, I'm like, whoa, Jesus, man, what got into you today? Like, what is going on here, And Jesus is not in the business of recruiting people. You know what I mean? He is just laying it out there. He is not like our shyster salesman who's just trying to draw people in and not showing them the fine print or anything like that. I mean, he is just laying it out there all the way. And he does this through the next, 7 verses that come after this. And there's no sugarcoating what he's saying here. And it's just shocking, isn't it? And so, I think he talks about this bit with the cross. So let's kind of dig into that a little bit more. And some of us are, you hear these words about you must hate your mother and your father. And it's like, man, Jesus, I'm sorry, but you are talking out of 2 sides of your mouth here. I mean, just a little while ago, you're talking about honor who? Your father and your mother. And he says things like, the greatest commandment is to love your neighbor as yourself, these type of things. And yet now you're coming to this place and you're telling me to hate my brothers and sisters and my mother and father and all these kind of things. It's like so confusing there. We're going to deal with this right now. And there's something we have to understand to kind of unlock what's beginning to unfold in the parable that he's going to share here, is that this word hate, it's not quite used in the sense that we might use that today in wanting ill will towards another person. It's actually this interesting word in this Jewish culture. The word is missio. And it's a term that really expresses a priority or a preference over someone else. So some of you in your Bibles, you might have some translations, instead of that word hate, it has the word that you must, more than might be used. You must love Jesus more than these other people. And this is not a new thing just in the Jewish culture, but it goes back all the way in their Hebrew heritage. In Genesis chapter 29, there's a story that is unfolding there where Jacob, the son of Isaac, he's a young man, young stallion. He's looking for a bride, and he finds this girl, and her name is Rachel. She's the younger of 2 girls. And so the father goes and to back then, man, I mean, to get engaged, to get married, man, you had to kind of give tribute to the father. And so this father's tribute was, man, you got to work for me and serve me for 7 years. And so he does that. Jacob goes and works for the father for 7 years. And then time comes, the wedding day and everything. And to his surprise, the father, man, he slips in the older sister instead of the younger sister. One's a little more homely and everything, And so her name is Leah. And he says these words. He says, like, it says there in Genesis chapter 29 that Jacob loved Rachel more than Leah. And then right after that, it says, when the Lord saw that Leah was hated. And so it's this comparison. It's like, I love you more is a word that's hate, but it's still a very strong word, isn't it? It's a strong sin. I guarantee you, Leah, she probably might have felt hated in that place, but she was not. She was loved, that her younger sister was loved more than her. What Jesus is saying here when he's saying that if you want to be my disciple, that you must hate your mother and your father and your brother and sister, what he's saying is that you must love me more than those relationships that you have in your life. The most primal, God-given relationships in your life that you have, of a spouse, of sons and daughters. For some of those of you who are young and dating and you're like on that verge of moving into taking your relationship into a marriage, it's like he is saying more than that Jesus, that for you to be my disciple, that you must make me the priority in your life, the number one relationship in your life. Jesus, he comes along and he is a rabbi and he's calling disciples, and a disciple is nothing more than a learner. It's a follower. It's someone who comes along a rabbi and learns his teachings and his way that he lives his life and so that in the transfer of that this disciple becomes like the rabbi and lives in that kind of way with his same authority and power and all those things. But Jesus steps onto the scene of a rabbi, but he does something a little bit different here. I guarantee you there's no rabbi who's saying it like this, that Jesus, above calling his disciples, you and me, into a place of taking on a certain mindset of information or certain lifestyle or certain bit of practices or rituals that we do on a weekly basis, like coming here and worshiping, what he is calling us to, primary, first and foremost, he is calling us into a relationship with himself. He is calling us into fellowship with himself, in communing with himself, like what we're going to get to do here in a minute. He is calling us into a way of loving and living with him in a relationship where we serve him with all of our life. That is what he's calling us to in being disciples. And it's not just being a priority in our relationships. He's calling us to make him a priority on our life goals and our dreams and our desires, all these things. And he does that as he takes this even further. And he talks about, unless you carry your cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. And when he used that word cross, it just meant something totally different to those people. To a first century Jew under Roman oppression, and this would make them shudder. I mean, the hair standing up on the back of their neck, and they're going like, what? What are you talking about here? And he's saying this in the certain way that he says it, for some, and we wonder, gosh, does this mean like I cannot be a disciple unless I take on a crucifix on my back and I'm walking towards execution, to pain and anguish and dying in that kind of way? And for some, at that time and in our world still, yes, that's the reality of martyrdom, of giving one's life in that kind of way for the cause of Jesus Christ and the kingdom. But there's an interesting way in the nuances in the original language when he says this. There's a certain tense that he's saying this in such that it's a present continuing tense, where he's saying, in reality, a translation might sound like this: unless you keep on carrying your cross and keep on following me, you cannot be my disciple. And it's kind of this continuation thing. It's this sense that of understanding that Jesus, the supreme cross bearer, that he was bearing a cross and carrying a cross long before that passion narrative, long before that road to Golgotha. He was carrying a cross. He was bearing a cross when he humbled himself and submitted to the will of the Father. He came into this world as a little baby. In that place, he's carrying a cross. All his life is just this picture of of submitting his will to the Father. And it's the same for you and me, that Jesus calls us not to wear a necklace around our neck or put an ornament on our Christmas tree or even anything in our yard. He is saying to submit yourself to the will of the Father and all of your desires to his kingdom. That is what is required to being a disciple. Nothing less than that. You can imagine what it feels like in the crowd right now, that some of those that maybe have just been like kind of physically there and they're kind of just going along with the crowd and everything, man, this is awesome. They're just kind of physically attached to Jesus, but he is raising the bar and saying, man, there's a whole nother level. Yes, there's one thing of salvation, but he's talking about like our lives. It's not just a call to be saved. It's a call to coming into a relationship with him and following him as a learner for the rest of our life and becoming like the rabbi. That's what he is calling us to. We get to this place where finally he is now jumping in and he begins to tell these stories, these two stories, to kind of just nail it all together here. He tells the story of a man who builds a tower, and then he tells another story of a king who's about to consider in waging war. Okay? So this is how it plays out. Let's keep on going here in verse 28. It says this. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Will he not first sit down and estimate the cost to see if he has enough money to complete it? For if he lays the foundation and is not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule him, saying, this fellow began to build and was not able to finish. Then he launches into this next one here. He says, or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king, will he not first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming at him with 20,000? If he is not able, he will send out a delegation while the other is still a long way off, and will ask for terms of peace. In the same way, any of you who does not give up everything he has cannot be my disciple. I don't know about y'all, man. I was living in Birmingham several years ago, right in 2000, and right there on 280, right before I moved back here to Auburn, they started to build the digital hospital. You guys remember this was right next to what was the Health South building. This massive, unbelievable hospital that was going up there. This state-of-the-art technology. We're going to be a drop of paper in this thing anywhere. You know what I mean? It was going to be this unbelievable place. And as it went up, and then at some point, I'm not even sure what happened. Maybe had something to do with what's happening next door at Health South. But that thing came to a screeching halt. And it was just really a tragedy. What was happening? There's this huge, massive monument right there on 280 that was going up, and it was like you could not drive by in the middle of a thunderstorm and rain and seeing the rain pouring in, into that place and seeing that, man, what is being destroyed, what corrosion is happening in there because there wasn't the funds to go through and do this. And we see this in this time, in the same thing here that Jesus is saying, say there's a man that's building a tower, like say a tower over his vineyard. And that day of time, man, a tower, not just anybody built a tower, man. A tower was kind of like something, you're going to have this tall pillar on your land or on your property, and it's kind of a monument of prestige or something that says, man, you're well off, or that you can stand on this tower and look over your land. But nobody is going to do that, would they, unless they just sit down and really say, okay, how much resources do I have to do this? And once I'm finished building this tower, will I have enough to sustain me? What is going on? He's saying make a wise decision here. Count the cost. He's saying the same thing for you and me when it comes to following Jesus in this kind of way, that he's not looking for a whimsical, just a quick emotional, man, I'm going to do this, because, man, that does not take endurance. And it takes endurance, a lifetime of following Jesus in this kind of way. Consider the cost. This is a huge undertaking that you would be entering into here. And in the same way that, that this guy who builds a tower halfway and everybody would ridicule him, man, gosh, this guy didn't even consider what was going on here. In the same way, we don't want to be those kind of people, to really consider what you are doing in this place of following Jesus. As a learner, as a disciple, as someone whose life is going to be enmeshed and taken into his mission. And then he goes into this next story, and it kind of has a little bit different slant here. But there, as we read, there's this king, and he's considering going to war with another king. But the deal is, man, this other king is already on his way. It's kind of like this original king is just getting word that he's about to be invaded. That this king is coming after him. And he's assessing what he has. He's got about 10,000. You can imagine what he's looking at. How many do I need here? And looking at the terrain and what advantages do we have? What weapons do we have? What can we do to fight this battle but still protect ourselves from maybe enemies on the other side? And he's taking stock. He's taking inventory. Can I do this? And he finds out that this other king, has twice the amount of resources and men that are coming after him. And he has a decision to make. And it says if he decides to go for peace, he will go then and go out in peace. But you know what? If this king does not make a decision, then that decision is coming to him. And he will have a war on his hands whether he wants to or not. And what Jesus is leading us to here is just in that first story where he's saying, consider the cost of becoming a disciple. That in this story, he's saying, consider the consequences of discipleship. Consider the consequences of choosing not to be a follower of Jesus in this kind of way. Consider the consequences, yes, of following him in this kind of way. I love it. I just kind of hear this ringing in my head as we get to this place, this part in Matthew chapter 15 where Jesus says to his disciples, he's like, if any of you wants to save your life, then you're actually going to lose it. that in your pursuit of trying to build up your life with the things that you want and your desires and your dreams, if I could just have this, all this, the pursuit of that, it's like chasing the wind, in such a way that in your pursuit of that you actually lose your life. But then he says this, but if you lose your life for my sake, then you're actually going to find it. I think that was at the heart of Jesus when he's saying this here. He's like, you consider the consequences of what's going to happen here. Are you willing to give up everything, like he says here, to give it up, to give up all of who you are, to love me more than any other relationship that you have, that it's in that place that you will actually find life. And this is heavy stuff. I just got to tell you, man, it has been wrestling and dealing in me. One thing, Leslie and I, we're at a place right now where we've been working through some of this Dave Ramsey stuff, in our own family for a few years now. Next month, man, we are making our final payment on some student loans. And I'm like, hallelujah, praise the Lord. I'm so daggum. But no, I don't, please, but here's the deal. And so now, one of our goals is to become debt-free. Just like this church, of what we're trying to do is to live in that kind of way. And I'll be honest, man, at the cusp of paying this thing off and looking at, man, what can we do with this, with our mortgage, and rolling this thing, doing, those of you in Dave Ramsey, the snowball effect and all that stuff. And it's like, but I'm finding that in the last few weeks in my heart, man, I'm looking at this not so much about the kingdom. But it's like the Spirit's been convicting me and showing me, man, Josh, this is your dreams. Like you're putting too much hope in you being debt-free. Now, that's a great thing, to work towards that. But it's just like a posture of my heart. And I find that I'm thinking so much about, gosh, what can I do after I don't have any debt anymore, instead of, man, how much can I give after this? How much more will we be able to help other people? All these kind of things. And the Lord's had to kind of recalibrate me back in. It's these kind of hidden, deep down things that Jesus wants to get to in our lives. That this is the nitty-gritty, on the ground, following Jesus kind of stuff. Just yesterday, I went over to a family's house. It's a couple that have 2 kids. They actually worship with us over in our Lee Scott congregation there. But it's Chris and Amber Martine. And they have been through the process over about the last year of becoming certified to be foster parents. And we were kind of hanging out with them for a little bit yesterday and over at their house, and we were talking about this, and it has not let me go talking to them. We were in their backyard, and I was talking with Chris, and he was saying, I could just see him telling the story, how that he's come to this place of submitting to this. They moved here. They were both in the Navy. They retired, left the Navy. They wanted to move to Auburn. They built a great, beautiful new home, picked out everything. Nice countertops, all this kind of stuff. And they loved their home for their family. And it was kind of like that was their dream. But then in the last year, God has been working in their heart and taking what was theirs and taking them through a process of yielding and signing that over to Him. That it's His home. That it's His space. That it's no longer theirs. It's no longer their preferences, but it's to serve Him in that kind of way. That is what it means to yield, to give ownership of everything in our house, in our life. Whether it's yielding over our house or our car, or our finances, or our investments, or our time, or yielding over our heart to Him. And as we went through their house, they were showing us around, and in their bedroom now is a whole crammed corner with a desk and all this stuff that once was a study that they had for them. And it might sound little, but this was a place that they kind of had their own little room. Their kids, their boys are now, 2 boys are sharing a room. Their bunk beds crammed in another little room, but they have made room in their home. He's a police officer, and that's a room that he would go and sleep in when he worked on the night shift and everything. And so he's giving that up, what was a preference of a comfort that he had there. And it's all crammed in. But you know what's in that room now? Are 2 beds. And they're going to be certified either Wednesday or Thursday this week, and they're expecting a call that day. That night, probably this week, they're going to have 2 children that are in their home. And I'm thinking about this song that we're singing here, about a father that holds the orphans in his arms, a loving father holding the orphans in his arms. That is a picture of discipleship, of people who have yielded their life in every way to Jesus Christ, bit by bit, day by day, with endurance, giving up their preferences, and giving up having a nice, neat house and something you could take a picture of and it'd go in a Pinterest or Southern Living or whatever. The furniture's all crammed in a corner there, But they are about something greater. They're about something better, something that is other-oriented for the kingdom. And Jesus comes to this place and he says, unless you give up everything, you cannot be my disciple. He's not saying here, unless you give away everything. He's saying, unless you give it up to me, you release it all to me, even your own life, that you can't be my disciple. And then he goes into this bit about salt. I love it when Jesus starts talking about salt. He says this, verse 34, salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is fit neither for the soil nor for the manure pile. It's thrown out. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Salt. I like salt on my food. It tastes good. But back in this day and time, man, salt, it had a whole nother depth of meaning in their culture. It was essential to life. Salt. They didn't have any refrigerators, no mini fridges, nothing. They didn't have the Yeti coolers either. Salt was a preservative. It prevented decay, and it was also something that was used as a cleansing agent. It was an antiseptic. It was something that was poured into wounds. And then, kind of third, it was something that added flavor. And Jesus is saying, man, that back in that day and time, there were rocks of salt, and they wouldn't necessarily lose their appearance on the outside, but on the inside, they would lose their saltiness. You say, man, if you are that kind of person, you might have the veneer on the outside of following Jesus. But if you lose what's in the core of your heart, of loving Him being the priority in all of your relationships, and you surrendering all of your life to Him, everything that you have to Him, then you will remain in that way of being salty. Be salty dogs, But when you live in that way, and I think about the Martines, how, man, they are being salt. But in their way of following Jesus and being learners in that way, that they are being poured into the wounds of this community. That they are a preservative that is holding back decay and evil and darkness from coming into the lives of these children. That they are an agent of love that is moving forward, and that is the call of what He is bringing us to. That this call to discipleship, the power of discipleship is not in what we say no to or what we give up in ourselves. It's what we say yes to, and the power of Jesus living in our lives. And this morning, as we come here and we gather around this table and across the front, and we come and we take bread and we dip it in a cup, I want us to be mindful that in that same way that Jesus is walking along and He turns back towards a crowd and He begins to launch into all this hard stuff that He's doing here, that in the same way He is doing that today. He's looking at this crowd and He's saying, man, this is what it means to follow me. And in the same way, it must have shocked some of those people in that day and time and really made them examine their commitment to Jesus and start to count the cost. Am I willing to do this? May His word do the same thing for this crowd today. That you would count the cost, consider the consequences as we come to this place and we commune with Him. That maybe there's some of us that are like, I hear you, Jesus. You're drawing me in to a deeper place of surrendering. And what better place to say yes to Him than here this morning? And so will you pray with me? Jesus, I have a short prayer. And that's just, would you lead us? Would you lead us in the way of surrendering? And that, Jesus, you are not asking us to do anything anything that you haven't done yourself to the will of the Father. And everything you did was all about pointing to Him. And that you loved Him, and you knew full well the cost that it would be for you. And you knew the consequences, and you chose well. And so now, Jesus, we turn to you, and we submit to you as we come to this place today. And we just say that we want to commune with you. We want to fellowship with you. We want to grow in our relationship with you. We pray this together as your people in your name. Amen.